Hello, everyone. Um, Welcome to the October edition of Cafe Muse. I'm Ellen Cole, and I'm one of your co-hosts tonight. I'll be co-hosting along with Renee Garrity and Karen Allenier. Tonight, we're delighted to welcome our two poets, Nils Michals and Sammy Miranda. I'm going to be introducing Nils, and Renee will be introducing Sami. Afterwards, if we have time, we'll have a Q&A where you can type your questions into the chat, and the two poets will answer you. So, before I begin introducing Nils, I just want to let you know that next month, our two poets are going to be Kristen Hampton and our own Michael Davis. So I'm delighted to introduce Nils Michals. Nils is a poet and a teacher from Santa Cruz, California. He's the author of 3 poetry collections. His most recent book was the winner of the 2018 Washington Prize and was published by WordWorks in 2019. His 2 previous books were also prize winners. Lure won the Pleiades Lena Miles Weaver Todd Prize. I hope I haven't mangled the pronunciation. And that was in 2004. And then his second book, Come Down to Earth, was published by Bahan in 2014 and won the May Sarton, New Hampshire Poetry Prize. His work has been published in many journals, including Pank, Diode, Sonora Review, the Balat Poetry Journal, Catamaran Literary Reader, Jubilat, and others. He teaches in the English department at the West Valley College, and he's the faculty advisor for the student literary magazine Voices. I asked Nils what were some of the things he felt passionately about, and he said supporting and promoting student voices. So that I know is an important thing to him. And I thought Gembox was a remarkable book. Each poem in the book is a prose poem, and it literally looks like a box, justified on the right and left sides. So it's a neat little rectangle. Each poem is a neat little rectangle on the page. But if you look inside the box, you're drawn into a world that explodes with images, wordplay, lyric language, surprising bursts of humor, a surrealistic landscape that encompasses choreographed trees, houses of spun sugar, a bison that dines on dahlias. The book is populated with recurring characters, a man, a woman, a child, a creature called the fjord horse, a painter that hovers in the sky, the reader, and the poet. The poems unwind like a tangle of string. Each sentence starts in one place and curves so many times you have no idea where you're going to end up. This morphing world is like dropping into a fairy tale if fairy tales were littered with pop references, modern tragedy, and the familiar outlines of our own world. The box-shaped poems themselves are metaphors. These poems are like light boxes, candy boxes, houses of ticky-tacky, glass houses, worlds within worlds. So I'm going to invite you to go for a little journey with our poet, Nils Michals.
Thank you, Ellen. What a wonderful introduction. That was wonderful. Before I begin, I just want to thank Cafe Muse for putting on this wonderful reading series. Of course, I want to thank the WordWorks, and also want to thank Sammy. I'm really looking forward to hearing your work, so thanks for reading with me. As Ellen noted, all of the books are from, all of the poems, most of the poems today are from Gembox. And she, covered a lot of bases, a lot of the things I was going to talk about, just to kind of set you all up, which is the poems themselves are in prose form, but also in box shape. And there are a number of recurring characters, a man, a woman, a child, and of course the very mischievous fjord horse. I even brought a little fjord horse for you guys to see what one looks like. And this fjord horse has certainly a mind of his own. So I'll just get right into it. For years, the man and the woman made a straight line of variable lengths. Then one morning, the fjord horse woke up as anime, big in Japan, as it were. So we learned Japanese under some trees, which is how he came to understand a cherry blossom, the complexity of which led the fjord horse to believe that nothing could really be understood. For example, all satellites tell us is that the higher they go, the more the Earth just looks like the human body under a microscope. Fjords and lungs, fields and skin, and so on. Once the woman asked the man if he would rather be paid by the word or by the light. The man preferred the latter, a difficulty in places where one cannot recharge in a time scale meaningful to humans. For example, a glacier's idea of a joke is to say, here is a massive boulder not from around here. What the glacier really means is, one must not walk in there all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. A terrible, terrible revelation for a child. These days, the afternoons feel like wildly viral meme beings arriving from some distant cultural cloud. Lincoln logs among some coffee and juice boxes, PB&Js and illuminated ponies, glitter sticker kittens. Little incongruent triangles of sun follow the child wherever she goes, something that just seems to happen more often when one doesn't yet know how much a body can love the light. Might have some buddies from my old basketball team, so I thought I would throw in my one basketball poem. We'll see how that goes. In your only rectangle dream, you can't stop dunking, and the dead spot you force them toward works every time. The other team stands around like bewildered giraffes, and the crowd is one stupid, beautiful adolescent mouth. Air glasses the edges of uniforms, the rims, the slicked hair of the coaches. As is often the case in dreams, though, your luck runs out. Birds arrive, flocks of swallows, through some holes in the roof. They roost in the rafters and shit on everything and pretty much flaunt their swallowtails in a universal unfolding of singularity with codimension. Did you know this? This is something Dali painted, his last. The catastrophe in a series of looping integrals that are of no interest to the crowd, now punchy and restless, now emptying out into the night, there being a rumor of the imminent arrival of some bros in vans with big tires. You can't find your teammates, and because the fjord horse is mostly douchey these days, he just takes his ball and leaves. That cheerleader who slapped your ass in warm-ups is nowhere to be found, and someone cuts the lights, and that's it. Just you and the swallows and the quiet between their infernal chirping. In the dark, you can occasionally feel something in your private browsing for kitten memes or a porn for the ages, something truly magical between two strangers' bodies just now becoming familiar. Two terrains of sorts, negotiating their union. A snow-capped mountain here for an alluvial plain there. But there is no coming back with grace, nor is there left in the bowl even a single cheddar bunny for you. Long ago, when the sun and mirrors declared war on everything, you mistook ocean for desert. You even once saw dessert, the sea and little bristling caps of wine-dark frosting, a terrible error that left civilizations lost in the pitch black of prayer, not one individual among them amazed at how a voice makes it through the day without breaking. A number of the poems in Gembox, I became really interested in this idea of having choices and options, if you will. And so this would be an example of one of those poems. Complications include, but are not limited to, A, processing malfunctions, as in the absence of a funny feeling concerning the invisibilities of familiar afflictions. For example, the sun, sea, and wind problem, and the hearing but not listening again disorder. B, language deficiencies, as in fiddle-dee-doo, which is all the man can articulate, or as understood by the woman who, once having accumulated all the use and exchange she would ever need, gave up on words altogether, each one having grown a wild vacuum, Greek eyes, if you will, staring through her on the way to a middle distance. C, erectile mysteries, such as, why is modern architecture glass in particular so arousing syndrome? Or, as is often seen in the instance of the vas deferens, that carrying away vessel, when severed, sealed, and folded back into the darkness, the vast difference of what passes as quiet among oceans, and as such, D, some problems with sound. For example, yesterday, how the man glanced up from his weed whacker to see the woman reading, and the child, for once, silent. The light through a leaf hopper, holding her wonder so still the man felt, for once, a deep synonymity with triangles. And E, inauthentic duplicities, such as the man has a feeling. If you see the man experiencing one or more of these complications, immediately put the man's thinking on auto reply. Have him take out the trash, eat a cheesesteak, tell him a joke. So the sun, the sea, and the wind all walk into this bar. Not that one. Exactly no one thinks that one is funny. Obviously, lots of boxes in this collection. Here's a poem with a lot of boxes. The pillbox, the tea box, the matchbox, the fire, the fireplace, and corresponding box of shadow. The window out to the deep hour mountains, the midnight cottonwood confusion. The moonlight, and in it, the mailbox plainly announcing its stupidity. Light 2 on the toolbox, left open for some time. Some light through the leaves on the grass gone wholly white. The stillness, the, oh my God, is that snow? It's June, is that snow? The dreaming child's breathing, the man alone in the bed, the surfaces in the room, how the moonlight overcleans them, his thinking and inability to unsee, his thinking as if on the side, an autoerotic pillow talk with nothing to court but the popping of the house between the silences of the empty suburban schoolyards. The woman being in a far closet of the house, the woman slowly pearling something in her cotton candy bathrobe, the woman making an organic shape there in the manufactured sun of the Happy Light therapy box. There is that terrifying poem about the moon and the tree, different tree, the oven, the black and white of the oven, and the body awkwardly there. I would give everything I have, my keys, here take them, my body, it's yours, my thoughts, they're no good anyhow. Anyone can see the child is loved. Even the seeds drift into her. The woman, too, is loved. The man was reasonably well employed, had a body free from trauma and time for designer coffee. But then the fjord horse, but then arrived the fjord horse, top buttoned in tweed. You know that part of the dream when you're just about to offer a hand to something tiny-hearted, injured, and then in drags a mountain, blue and scraped clean with granite. Whatever you're helping turns into anchovy slapping hysterically in the moonlight. Then the shimmy, the shake, the shooby-dooby-doo straight into some other country of the dream. The key, the lock, just kidding, the key. The skeleton, the house, the master. The car, the card, the control, the do not duplicate. Have you ever owned a key? That's a thoughtless question. Of course you haven't. I once kept a key forged from the dark fire of lifting lanterns. True story. When I held it, my hand felt lighter and more burdensome at the same time. The key, the metal piece that works the lock, the satisfying feel of the click, the padlock, the deadbolt, the knob lock, the intricate systems of water that raise and lower supertankers across Ismay, the rope lock, the arm lock, the Loch Ness, the lock of hair. Just kidding, the key, always just the key. As in the key of C, the C's key, a briny thing ringed in rings of green, the instrument, the implement, the tool, the apparatus to which is recorded the falling of perhaps 1,000 dead or dying horses through endless striations of mineral light. Have you ever had some problems with the sun? Have you ever had some problems with the weight of water? Have you ever just said, fuck it, and replaced the sea with a drink in your hand? Just kidding. The key, the world's smallest, always just the key, hung somewhere deep, something that glints recklessly, but for no one to see. All right, I'm gonna read a couple of new poems. I think everyone has a pandemic poem, so I thought I would read my pandemic poem. I have two. I'll read the first one. It's called Pandemic, not very original. Everyone was worried and looking at everybody else in a new way. Some tabulated their hand-wringing in color-coded diagrams. Some unearthed glue guns, willed sea glass into zoetropes for Barbies framed behind dreamhouse windows. Others divested, financially, emotionally. No one knew precisely what was happening at that very moment inside their own bodies, which made the clouds do this tricky thing, something the man fell for over and over again. The woman? Well, we'll get to that. For the time being, everyone's favorite characters were back, albeit in a medieval way. And by that we mean plows and trepanning and heretofore unseen applications of burlap. What else is there to do when every news story is a lung on fire? No one bothered telling the birds, or children for that matter, who rioted freely up and down hallways. The noise or silence was deafening, depending. For example, every silence had the man on the verge of sobbing, and then some asshole's air drill broke it like the world's worst passing of Thanksgiving gas. The whole country tried to replace what it was feeling with an episode of Laverne and Shirley, but the laugh track was slightly off, and it really wasn't that funny anyway, now that people were dying. Poor people just kept working under the assumption that they'd be fucked regardless. The real problem was that bodies didn't understand where they began, where they ended, which made us all pay attention a little more to the small negotiations therein. The light or absence thereof, the surfaces of objects, a breath into the air, of course, which could no longer be trusted. I'm going to finish with a poem about a place that's special to me. Many of you know that my community and the community here near Santa Cruz was pretty devastated by the fires in August, and the mountain community here is really, really hurting. And a place to me that is really significant is Big Basin State Park, which unfortunately was basically entirely consumed. Still haven't had a sense of what has been destroyed, but from what I've heard, almost every structure has been destroyed. There's a little lean-to near a small, beautiful, tiny little meadow called Sky Meadow, and it was built by Girl Scouts in the 1920s. And so this poem is kind of an homage to that. It's coming out in a small chapbook called Room, which is forthcoming this fall or winter. So this is called In the Sky Meadow Girl Scout Shelter. 1. The girls who built this place are probably dead now. 2. Everything is terribly dry, mere remnants. Woodworm galleries in the sunken joists, lilting thistleheads long hollowed of color, the blazing up of golden ovals where the deer bed, and higher, the peculiar logic of house clouds come to pass the meadow brief as a thumb over a bronze coin rubbed free of face. 3. Have I been in dream, in another's hunger, in this air? I cannot see myself, have seemed to notice a future me disinterested in me, indifferent as to which voice I will select for my car's navigation, or whether my wife will find me wanting in some category of character not currently available. Will I find myself wanting? Will I find a jowl to tuck away in a private fold? Will I be the asshole who Ubers a single tray of cucumber finger cakes across a landscape comprised of nothing but wind? 4. There must be a time when everything alive returns to touch this place. The grasses glazed on chlorophyll, the meadow intersected by sun and back-tracking wood fog, jays, bees, leaf hoppers, sapphire wings flush in the unassuming essing of threaded air. There must be a time, daydreaming itself, drifting to a center, reminiscent of everything unremembered, as every center layered in all that is rose and risen. Thanks.
Good evening. Thank you, Nils. I so enjoyed that. I loved your word associations and lock and key. And it is basketball season. For your friends, I'm sure are enjoying that. I'm Renee Garrity, and I'm pleased to introduce our second poet tonight, Sammy Miranda. It might be easier to describe him by what he doesn't do than what he does do, but I'll tell you a few things anyway. He's a teacher, of course, a poet, a painter, a printmaker, a mixed media artist, a broadside maker, an embroiderer, a performer, and a woodcarver. You can visit his website to take a look at examples of his other talents other than writing. He's the author of the chapbook Departure, and most recently, his full-length collection, We Is. You'll find prints of his wood carvings throughout the book of the collection of We Is. We pays homage to his heritage as Puerto Rican, and more specifically, a Puerto Rican in the United States. He is a storyteller. Each poem is a vignette and it's its own story. But when the vignettes are put together, they become a world of realities that share the feelings and the encounters of displacement, a separation from your heritage. He shows the displacement in the longingness and loneliness of some of his characters, that the music is different, that the mambo and salsa are different, the misunderstandings between cultures, and how the voices of racism respond in violence. He places his characters and objects in a vivid setting that he paints with very few words. And the setting is so important to the characters and the objects, and it's central to the message that they're giving. In his poem, Josefina Goes to the Rooftop to Remember Home, you hear a young woman, Josefina, voice her unhappiness and longing for home. She's on the rooftop in New York City and looks across the other rooftops and says that she goes to the rooftop because they are the closest thing to a mountaintop she can find, the closest thing to home. There's no description of how many rooftops, the dinginess, the wires, or the mountains, but you can feel it and you can see it without those descriptions, and you can feel her longing for home. His lines, Sammy Miranda's lines, are short, but they don't need length. The words he chooses set the context for his characters and are enough to present evocative images. Sometimes the images make you smile, and sometimes they make you shudder, but they always educate you. The images he creates with a few words are so strong, if you close your eyes for a moment, you might be transported. In Desert Object number 1, Zapatos, you just might feel the desert sand, the heat and thirst, but you will most definitely see, as he writes, shoes, a child size 3, worn. They know more miles than they should. And after reading his poems, you will begin to understand. With that, I'd like to welcome poet Sammy Miranda.
Thank you, Renee, for such a thoughtful introduction. I appreciate it. Thanks, Cafe Muse, for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to read with Nils. I'm just gonna get right into it. I'm gonna start with a new poem. I've been playing around with cutting out National Geographic words and phrases from old magazines, and then compiling those into poems. And this is one of the poems that came from that. Home. When it's time to leave it all behind, discard button, bead, and bauble. Leave all things familiar. Be sure not to miss the boat. People are moving, migratory water birds in flight. Many immigrants land in a city of so many places. Everyone, sooner or later, finds one special they name home. I'm gonna go from there, and actually I'll move from that one into the sequence of poems that Renee quoted from the Desert Objects poems. And these came about after seeing images that were of objects collected of people who left them in the desert on their way from Mexico into the US. The sun wants to melt me into sands that would cover the reminders of me. Wants to bleach bones left exposed, turn them into landmarks passers-by will ignore. Desert Object 1, zapatos. Shoes A child size 3, worn, they know more miles than they should. How old were you? Do the numbers of holes in the soles match your losses? Desert Object 2, Diccionario Inglés Español, Spanish English Dictionary, pages yellowed by use and sun. What were you hoping to say? Wanted to say, you are the reason. Wanted to say, I am need. Wanted to say, my child is like yours. Wanted to say, a dream is built out of necessity. Wanted to say, separation is never a decision made lightly. Desert Object 3, botella de agua con crucifijo. Water bottle with crucifix. Does this make the water holy? When lips were parched, did this water bless them? When it was left behind, was a lack of it torture, a nail puncturing flesh? Desert Object 4, caja de cigarrillos. A pack of cigarettes, only 4 left. How long have you been traveling? Did you smoke one every morning as a simple routine to hold on to? Did you exchange one for conversation between drags? Was it your last? I think I'll move from there to a couple of pieces that have to do with that Puerto Rican identity that Renee alluded to. She also, when we were talking previously, she mentioned a poem about West Side Story. And when we talked about it, she was like, those songs are stuck in my head. Yeah, mine too. I watch them, I watch that movie every year because my family tended to. But I really hate it. I really hate it. I really do, because there's one Puerto Rican in the whole movie. But here it goes. This ain't mambo. Adios, 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 Borinquen querida. My ulcers sing this song to remember home, to help me survive this place. Shots heard, pacata piquiti. Or is that Tito playing his timbal? Sticks on skin always remind me of gunfire and dancing. Baila, Maria, baila. Maria, I just met a girl named Maria. And no matter how she mambos, she ain't never gonna be Puerto Rican. While Maria dances, Anita wraps herself in red to mourn. She heard the plena report, tapped out on panderos, goat skin, screaming, Bernardo está muerto. And Chino killed Tony because he picked up a girl named Maria who wasn't from Sicily or Arthur Avenue. Chino killed him for treason against his own kind. Breaking news, the mixing is not accepted by either side. The dead are dead and the living are dancing a dance they never figured out. No one was meant to lead. This ain't mambo, motherfucker. So I guess I pack up my leather suitcase with warnings from Officer Krapke, promises from Munoz Marin, and maybe a santito or two. Because while I sang my goodbyes, I made promises too. Un día volveré a buscar mi querer. Not Maria, more like Anita, but still somebody else's idea of her. I'm gonna move from that back into some new work because it's been and actually poems that are constructed in the same way as the first one I read. This one's called Protection from Predators. A young man asks his father why blacks born in the United States feel unwelcome. Ask one of the Americans who've survived. Oh Lord, won't you buy me protection from predators, armor against decay? Listen, this is tough to admit. I would like to think that prayer softens hard times for families, but no. Time has not eased the grief of a woman whose son died. One day I called on Nina. She still smelled of charred flesh while raising a hymn on Sunday, barbed but beautiful. This song can be sung only by its owners. And I'll move from that one into something a little, maybe a little lighter. The first poems I wrote that were built from the National Geographics were actually a series that I titled "What Happens When You Drink." So I'm gonna read a couple of those sections. What happens when you drink? Answer 1. Many splendid things, like walking up the down escalator, eating lava, drinking sunshine. True. But today we saw the monster up close and took his measure. Amber waves, half a mile long. Then another section of that same series. What happens when you drink? Answer 3. The experiences of the men gathered, marking social status more accurately than time. I met them in every country I visited, some with tiny twisted bodies, thick with fleece, sheep await shearing, oblivious of majesty around them, weary. One of the other things that I tended to do is write what some would call it Frastic Poetry, and I'm just responding to the work of other artists whose work I enjoy or admire. So I want to read a piece that's built from images that a photographer, an Ecuadorian photographer, took that have really like stuck with me. There it goes. So the image is one of like a marriage happening in snow-covered mountains, and there's only a few people there. There's the couple, the person marrying them, and then a man that's just standing there as if protecting them. And this is matrimonio, in conversation with the marriage of the Yacaj and the Uma, a photo by Karen Miranda Rivadeneira. La que une. This is just a role I play, the task I must complete, this joining. I am not what you should focus on. That is why the mask on my face blurs my features. If there is beauty in me, you must ignore it. Find it only in the union. The path is not what you should focus on. This is why stones are scattered along it. Focus on the obstacles. If there is a direction, ignore it. Learn to make your way around and over things. The proposal. Will you stand in the cold with me? The vows. I will stack stones on top of my love so that it stays grounded, cannot be blown away like loose snow. El que protege. I know this union needs protection, that winds will come to try and tear it apart. I will keep my face as hard as stacked stone, so any threat knows I will be an obstacle. Will keep my hand on my machete, trained to use it gloved and ungloved, in the coldest of weather, so cold will never be a hindrance. There's another piece of hers that really struck with me, and it was a photo of a self-portrait of her laying in a bed and surrounded by stuff that would protect her, right? So, and in many Latin American countries, and including in Puerto Rico, mal de ojo, or the evil eye, is something we take very, very seriously. Okay, so this is called mal de ojo, and it's in conversation with Mom Curing Me from Evil Eye by Karen Miranda. There's always someone watching, waiting to bring something down on you. Always someone whose eye invades the balance between spirit and body. Someone who will compliment a child and forget to offer up a blessing, protection against petty spirits who want to prove that nothing is more beautiful than them. And always someone to block the path that evil winds down. Maybe a mother who knows the power of crucifixes, el divino niño, and an egg touched to a body dressed only in its skin. Curandera, who understands the rezos, los siete arabes, Florida water, sage, and tobacco, and practices the rituals that drive fever from the body, pushing it to find its way into a glass of water placed under the bed or on a nightstand where it can no longer heat flesh into discomfort. There's always the non-believer who does not understand the medicine of an elder's memory and its connection to ancestors who add their breath to the smoke blown from the lips of descendants who have learned how healing is passed down. One of the reasons that I write it in response to her images so much is that I also got a chance just to sit and talk with her for a minute while I was visiting my family in New York. And she told me the story of her aunt who would basically walk into laundromats and come out with people who needed a place to live. So this is Tia Margarita's love affair. Tia Margarita had a love affair with laundromats. She loved the way the smell of detergent opened people up to conversation, how the whir of the washers made people hum their sorrows to her, how the rumble of overloaded dryers forced her to lean into their stories and then carry them home like carefully folded laundry. I wasn't going to read this one, but why not? All right, so folks who know me know if you come to the house and there's a table out, we're going to play domino, right? And I grew up playing dominoes, grew up like with people in the house slamming bones on the table. So this is a lesson from my daughter about playing dominoes. Some things you should know is aguántala para que aprenda means hold on to her so she learns. Ficha is the domino. Okay, let me see if there's any other terms you might need to know. And capicu is when you win a game with both ends in the same number. Okay. Aguántala para que aprenda. I am the one who wraps himself around you like a hand around a ficha. I sit you here so you can learn. The numbers are not surprises. There's always an order to them. Men make the choices that cause them to seem out of place. Know that for men at a domino table, a smile may hide a disappointment, a hand lacking potential, a life lacking opportunity, and quickly turn into a threat. Watch the one who stands behind you. Watch where their eyes land. You never know what they see or the message they convey when they look away. Heed the warning on the wall to stop the bullshit, but know the difference between that and shit talking. Let loose the shit talking so they never know when a kapiku is going to be slammed onto the table. Guess I'll end with just two poems from my first collection, Departure, and it's they're Guzzles. Okay. And these are called Guzzles for Departure, these last two pieces. I wrap feet in strips of burial cloth so I can remember why I travel. I watched others leave until their bodies become a distance to travel. I pound my chest, driving away the demons of silence brought by departure, each slap marking the tempo that my feet will keep as I travel. My feet are wrapped tightly, but I do not slide them into shoes. I want the soles to feel the road, to blister, to be cut by the miles I travel. I do not want to leave. This is not a road I have chosen to follow. This is an exile, demanded by guns and bombs, so I must travel. There's no need for you to describe loss. I revisit that image daily. It has helped me map the road that will pull the breath from me as I travel. This road is not a place you return from, not a place to believe in. I have left belief behind with the carcass of a home that bid me travel. Your eyes are open wide. They stare at a sky full of stars. Are the constellations a single entity or a multitude of stars? The heavens seem to tremble if you stare long enough. Do your eyes see the couples dancing in the brightness of the stars? Do Orion and Cassiopeia listen to boleros filling the space between them? Do they grab hold when no one is watching and dance? Or are they just stars? Is this a magic trick, an illusion that plays with your position in relation to the night sky, making you see more than just stars? Does the sight of the North Star fill you with fear, make you think departure will be necessary, make you close your eyes to banish the stars? Or do you welcome the beauty of an open ocean and the sky made brighter by the presence of constellations telling the story of the stars? Is this your story? One where darkness is filled only with light, the light of small dots spread over the miles you must travel, a road of stars. Thank you.
Sammy, that was wonderful. And I'm going to take this opportunity for at least one question, and I'm going to pose it myself to both of you. And that is, I would like you, if you could, to talk a bit about the process of writing some of these poems. You could pick one poem or you could do it generally. But I think, you know, you both have come at writing in a very different way. And so let's start with Sammy, since his mind is already engaged here, and go, Sammy.
I like to play. I like to play. So a lot of this is about play. It's about thinking about how to take the things that I'm observing or coming to understand and then playing with the ideas that those have then placed within my vision, right? And then converting those. And how do I convert them and still make it my own, you know, and not make it something that I'm just regurgitating?
I like that answer. That's an awesome answer, because playing with words is, you know, what we do as poets. But I think more so, there's something more to your play than meets the eye, I'm pretty sure. All right then, Nils, what say you about this process?
Well, strangely, I've found my process change, and I think that Gembox was really unique, and the process that went into Gembox was something I had never done before. For one, I stopped reading poetry, and for another thing is I stopped asking for feedback. That was something that I had never done before. Just kind of went into it. I had a feeling like I wanted to write something that was more personal. I think, even though I have a kind of distance in the characters with the man, the woman, and child, it's by far the most personal book for me. And there was something about blocking out the rest of the world, poetry world, that was really important with that. Generally, when I write, and I consider myself a really slow writer, is that I build and build and build. And what happens is that it really all falls apart every single time. And it's incredibly frustrating because I've put, 4, 5, 6 weeks into a poem, and I just then don't know what to do. One of the things, though, that I think came out of that was this idea that I had all of the right pieces. I just needed to think about reassembling them in a different way. And so that process really worked for Gembox. It was incredibly frustrating because there's nothing worse than putting that much time in and then just feeling like it's all falling apart. But at the same time, I kind of developed this feeling, well, actually it means I'm on the right track, because I would kind of step back and come back to the poem and completely move things around. And I often felt like I had all of my parts. And so for Gembox, that was really a sort of a perfect way. And I resisted the impulse to get feedback. And I think what kind of resulted was just something a little bit weirder than I normally write, but also something I think that kind of kept in those imperfections, things that probably would have been polished out in a workshop setting. It felt really good to just, not do that at all and just say, I don't care, I'm going to write this weird thing and put it in there, and that's just what the poem's going to be. So I don't know if I'm still in the same place, but it was unlike anything that I'd done before, and it was really good for me in Gembox.
Nils, I want to follow up a little bit because Susan Oki posed a question much earlier in the chat session, whether or not there was a sense of Gertrude Stein at all in what you were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Great ear. I think, my background is studying modernists, and, I always tell my students, if I could go back to any time, any era, of course I'm going to Paris in the 1920s. And Stein's work, I think, is, though I came upon her work mostly late, I think about halfway through Gembox, I really got into it. And definitely the echoes are there.
And I want to pose one more question to Sami relative to your background in art and your interest in playing with words, and but it's also playing with music and all of that. So I wonder just if you could talk a little bit about your source, relative to who has influenced you. He's muted, so Henry, give us a, yeah.
All right. I mean, music in some way or another has always been a part of what I'm doing, especially since I started writing. The first time I ever performed to an audience, I actually was part of a show that included Nasser Abadi, the drummer who played with Amir Baraka, Pepe Gonzalez, who's a bass player from here in DC, who's just an incredible bass player, and a DJ. And ever since, and that was 96. And since then, I've been performing with Pepe the whole time. And basically what that's done is that he's become the rhythm that I read to, but also that I write to in many cases. Because I hear him in the back of my head going, yo, Sammy, where's the space for me? Come on, it's a conversation, right? So it's like, I always think about like, it's not just the bass player I'm having a conversation with, but the reader that I'm having a conversation with, right? So that back and forth definitely has like built musicality, I think, into how I think about writing poetry. And the visual work, everything for me is a portrait. It's a portrait of a moment. It's a portrait of a person. It's a portrait of a situation. And I just want to paint the picture of it, whether that's, you know, a carving, a print, a poem, or a painting. It's all that's the purpose, is like that creation of a portrait that whoever sees can see themselves in, you know.
Well, thank you, Sammy, and thank you, Nils. Take it away, Renee.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Great questions, Karen. We've come to the end of this evening's program. If you want to learn more about the poets from Cafe Muse, look up at our website, Cafe Muse Google Sites. If you aren't registered, please do so, and then we'll send you the Zoom link the night before the readings. You can also view archived readings on our YouTube channel, WordWorks Cafe Muse, and check out our Facebook page, Cafe Muse. We're coming into the technological world now. Our next Cafe Muse reading is November 2nd, 2020, classical guitar at 7 with Michael Davis. And Michael Davis will be one of our readers along with Kirsten Hampton. I'd like to give a special thanks to Karen Alanier, the founder of Cafe Muse, to WordWorks, my co-host, Ellen Cole, Henry Crawford, and our technical assistant, Julian Berman. And once again, I would like to thank, Nils Michals and Sammy Miranda for their wonderful readings tonight. And last, but of course not least, we thank each and every one of you for coming and joining us and being in our audience, because without you, we wouldn't be able to be here. Good night, stay safe, and be well.